Hi, I'm Jess. I am the Director of UX at Vice, and I'm going to be talking about the inevitability of redesigns and what that means. So when I joined Vice 2 years ago, it was clear we had a big problem to solve. We started out with one website with one brand, which was vice.com, and that quickly grew over 5 years into 10 websites with 10 different brands and 10 different CMSs, 10 different feature sets. You can imagine how this might be an issue. So looking at these different sites, it was pretty clear that we had a redesign looming ahead. In thinking about bringing together the network, we were considering what this meant, like what are the questions we need to answer and how can we get this right? So I want to take a little bit of time to talk about what was at stake, because redesigns are inherently risky. There's a number of users who are used to your product the way you are, and to some degree you might be fixing something that doesn't feel broken. Reactions can be strong and range from people creating PowerPoints of whether or not your product was created in Microsoft Word, or revolting, or just writing angry Medium posts. So some of the motivations for doing a redesign can be different. So one motivation might be that if you're shipping features every week or every day, you can create this sprawl of different things that isn't cohesive as a whole. So taking a step back and thinking about it holistically can help you get to a better place. Another reason might be that you live in an ecosystem like iOS, which changes its patterns out from under you. So you need to evolve and move forward to live within that ecosystem. The reason that we were facing was building something without anticipating how it might scale. So we had this underlying technology, it ended up being in a lot of different places, and we needed to address that. I want to take a moment to distinguish between a redesign and a rebrand. What I'm talking about here is not a rebrand per se, like elements of the brand changed during this, but our goal wasn't to change the brand and change the look and feel of what Vice represented. So, 8 ways that we got our redesign, hopefully, pretty right. At the beginning of the process, we were thinking a lot about the bigger picture and trying to take it all in. So we were answering questions like, what are we trying to do with the network as a whole? Who's using our sites? What do they like about them? What's different from each site to site? We put on many lenses. We looked at the data, we looked at the metrics, we did our own original research, we drew on the wealth of market research that already existed, and we looked at this wider competitive set. And one thing that was really challenging about this phase was people asking, well, is this design? Because up to that point, we didn't have a very well-established UX practice, and so we were bringing something new, bringing a new process, and trying to communicate the value. And so taking that moment to steep ourselves in what's here, what are we trying to accomplish, was really important. Another big learning was being able to strategize with our stakeholders. So as you can imagine, Vice.com has a lot of stakeholders with strong opinions. It's a big organization, there are a lot of creative people, and there are a lot of people who should be weighing in on various product decisions. But that said, we didn't want the whole project to get stalled by different conversations that might hold things up. Early in the process, we were trying to figure out where the brand should fall. How different should each site be? And so to tee up that conversation, we created a set of possibilities that was meant to illustrate just that one dimension. We said, here are our sites today, side by side in a mobile article page. What if we take one step towards all the sites being more similar? So now, they have the same heading bar layout, which was a little different here. One step forward, what if they have all the same fonts? What does that mean to us? And lastly, what if they had all the same colors? Granted, these are not where we landed at all, and there are still differences between these things, but from that conversation, we were able to get a better read on where we wanted to fall within that spectrum, and we didn't distract our stakeholders with so many other details that could have been in that conversation at that moment. This may have been hinted at by the previous slides, but one thing that we really cared about was spending our design cycles where users actually were spending their time, which was on mobile and was on article pages. You know, all the effort and time and energy we'd previously been putting into site designs was, so much of it was devoted to home pages and looking at home pages on desktop because there was a deep emotional connection to that as representing like the heart and soul of our sites. So we had to refocus our energy. We knew that we wanted the mobile reading experience to be great, and so that was where we spent a lot of our design time. This is how things ended up looking, if you guys were scared by the previous slides. This was a bit of a real lesson learned. So when we were thinking about the home pages, we wanted this amazing system which would be just like Legos that people could stack up any way they wanted and fill with anything they wanted. Maybe they could have a big thing here and a small thing here and put latest news and then features and just have complete creative control and flexibility. So we started to create the tooling that we thought would be needed. And we didn't love the way that this looked, so we got a little bit closer to something that was visually representing what a user would see on the front end. That said, as we started to dive into the engineering challenges, we realized that we were creating so much complexity. We had a brand new API. This could result in so many API calls on a single page that would really slow things down. This could result in duplicate articles, and we started to go down the path of trying to deduplicate and quickly dug ourselves into a bit of a hole. So while not the most thrilling, we ended up with something that was very simple, gave enough freedom to each site, but didn't overcomplicate things for our initial launch. So the CMS is a very important facet of what we do. I think it's easy to pay attention to the user-facing applications and the things that are shiny and exciting and see the light of day outside of our office. But we wanted to spend an equal amount of time and energy thinking about what our writers and editors in the building were actually using. We paid a lot of attention to, as soon as we had a team onboarded with our first site with Noisy, we started user testing with them, watching what they were doing, finding their pain points, and we actually got the engineers excited about it as well and had them watching the tests live, seeing what people were doing, and it really made a big difference to everyone's interest and motivation in solving these problems. That's some of our staff. They probably aren't using the CMS there. Another big thing with this whole system was being able to create guardrails so that we could easily spin up a brand new site within the Vice network in as straightforward a way as replacing the logo, replacing the typography, replacing the colors, and that was really a goal from the outset. So we have put together basically a template that will let teams outside of our own come up with brands, test brands, see if that's going to work within our system, and quickly get a read on the constraints of the system as a whole. So little bits and pieces, you can see the typography laid out, and basically everything in this template drives all of the pages. So it's really easy to see if you change your headline styles, how that would look across all the different pages in the site. So there's rigidity on the one side, and then there's also flexibility. We wanted to be able to give people the options to tell stories in their own way, to connect with their audiences in the way that they thought was important. When we first launched, we had just this newsletter module that people could sign up for a newsletter per site, and we quickly realized that that wasn't the touch point different brands cared about. Different brands were focused on different things. So one of our designers, Aaron, he's here, he came up with a great system that let each site share what they cared about the most. So Vice, they're promoting their Facebook page. Waypoint has a podcast on iTunes that they're able to send people to. And Munchies has a book, which if you guys like food, you should totally go to their site and check it out. So without a lot of complexity and without a lot of rigidity in the system, this lets each site pick out what they want to promote and gives them the option. So this whole effort, where did we arrive? We ended up with a set of pages and templates that's simple and lets each brand live and breathe on its own. So Munchies homepage, Munchies article. We wanted to emphasize the beauty of the photography in our sites and let the content speak for itself. So the last point I have is that we want to dream bigger. This template system is a place to start and a place that we were able to bring all the sites into the network. We're 1 month away from all of the sites being together, which is really exciting. And now we're trying to figure out what's next. We're still at the beginning. And a few of the things that we're thinking about now are how to empower telling more rich stories, how to create journeys that last a little bit longer, and how to create experiences that people actually want to come back to. It's a little bit like we have this shiny new toy, and it's part motorcycle and part skateboard and part, I don't know what that guy has, maybe camera. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Time for Q&A.
To each brand and find out if they needed, how we came to not everyone has a newsletter, and then manage to smooth out the process and figuring out what they needed.
Yeah, that was a rather lengthy process of back and forth with each editorial team. So there were a lot of emails, a fair number of meetings, and getting at the needs. I think people knew what social product or what podcast or what thing they were most excited to promote, and it was a matter of figuring out how the language and the imagery could work within the constraints.
How did you bribe the engineers to watch the live?
That's a great question. It was amazing, actually. We didn't have to. They brought it up themselves. They were like, well, we see that there are problems, but we don't know our users because they're in a completely different part of the building, and we don't get to see them and we don't get to interact with them. So actually, that little kernel was the motivation, and we were able to say, hey, we'll do this user testing, we'll give you a URL, you'll be able to go see it while it's happening and ask questions on Slack. So they actually had the enthusiasm themselves.
With typography and did you look at using a custom typography?
Yeah, so we had a bit of a come to Jesus with some of the typography. Our first site had custom fonts that we needed to load, and they were very special. It was the Franklin Gothic ITC and the alternate of Franklin Gothic ITC, which was more curvaceous and quirky. And as we went along, we gradually started to suggest, highly recommend that people use Google Fonts or fonts that we had through fonts.com. But I think actually now, and if my engineers were here, they would tell me I'm saying the wrong thing, but I'm pretty sure we're hosting a lot of our fonts ourselves now, so we have more flexibility to pick anything. Yeah. Well, I would say we're still a bit of a startup within a larger organization. Tech, has grown a ton at Vice in the past 2 years since I've been there. So the design team, we're small. We're 5, 6. And the engineering organization is like 50. We're small.
I know you have many international sites. Do all the different languages add extra complexity to the CMS?
That's a great question. They do. It's a whole other layer of constraints. So we have a few challenges with that. One is translating content and being able to say, you know, this article was originally published in the US and now Germany wants to republish it. So how do we make it easy for teams across the world to find content they're really interested in? The other layer that's been interesting is thinking about languages that read right to left, and how do we accommodate that in the UI?
What have you done in terms of preparing users for the redesign or having some sort of onboarding to get them ready for it?
We've done more like social media campaigns and hints being dropped around the sites. When Noisy launched, we got DJ Khaled to be like, nobody wants Noisy to win in every single article on the site, and all the things on social media were like DJ Khaled being like, they don't want Noisy to win, and then we dropped the new site. So it's not all of them have been DJ Khaled, but you know, there's been a little bit of energy put into social media and thinking about how to, you know, hint that to people ahead of time.
Jess, thank you so much. That was awesome.